Today's story is for everyone who has ever been called worthless. Everyone who has ever been told they weren't enough. Everyone who has ever stood in silence while cruel voices declared them broken, and thought quietly to themselves, just wait. My time is coming. Let me tell you something the old legends don't emphasize enough. There was once a bloodline of wolves called the Winter Line, born under frozen moons with silver in their fur and ice in their veins. They could command winter itself, could freeze enemies mid-strike, could walk through blizzards that would kill other wolves. The great packs of the ancient world feared them so deeply that they hunted every winter wolf to extinction, burning their territories and scattering their descendants to the winds. They called it victory. They toasted to the end of the winter threat in their great halls. They believed the bloodline was erased from history. Hello friends. Before we journey deeper into Lyra's story, I invite you to subscribe and share in the comments where you're listening from. Your presence here matters. Now, let's continue. But extinction is just another word for hiding. And dormant is just another word for waiting. These ancient wolves understood something that the proud alphas in their mountain fortresses never could. True power doesn't announce itself. It waits. It watches. It lets you believe you've won right up until the moment it destroys you. And tonight's story is about two wolves who understood that lesson better than anyone who came before them. An alpha who let his entire pack believe he was crippled, shattered, dependent. A man confined to a wheelchair after an ambush meant to end his bloodline. Pitted by the very traitors who had orchestrated his fall. They called him the broken alpha. They whispered that his wolf had died with his ability to walk. They smiled to his face and divided his territory behind closed doors. They patted his shoulder like he was a wounded pup and spoke slowly as if his mind had failed along with his legs. They made alliances with enemy packs, sold his secrets, and counted down the days until they could take everything. They had no idea he was watching. Listening. Planning. Recording every whispered conversation, every act of treason, every moment of betrayal in a ledger that would one day demand payment in blood. His name was Rhovan Blackthorn, 32 years old, once the most feared alpha in the Northern Territories, now reduced to a pitiful invalid in a wheelchair. Or so they believed. And then he needed a wife. Not for love. Not for companionship. But for the final piece of an ancient law that would let him drag every traitor into the light and execute them under the full moon's witness. And fate delivered to him Lyra Winters, 23 years old. A woman whose own father had sold her like livestock to erase his gambling debts. A woman who had been called wolfless her entire life, mocked at her own coming-of-age ceremony when her wolf never emerged. A woman who had watched her childhood promised mate reject her in front of the entire pack and choose her golden wolf sister instead. A woman who had worked herself to exhaustion for 5 years in the pack's lowest positions, enduring humiliation and cruelty from wolves who believed her defective. But never, not once, had she bowed her spirit to anyone. She walked into his mountain fortress expecting to serve a broken man, expecting nothing but a cold prison of a marriage to a cripple who couldn't even stand. And on their wedding night, when she stood in that stone chamber preparing herself for a lifetime of quiet suffering, he rose from that wheelchair on 2 powerful legs, crossed the room with a predator's lethal grace, looked into her eyes with a gaze burning with 2 years of contained fury, and spoke the words that would bring an empire of traitors crashing down. Now the real game begins. Hello friends. Before we journey deeper into Lyra's story, I invite you to subscribe and share in the comments where you're listening from. Your presence here matters. Now, let's continue. Let me take you back to a crumbling apartment in the slums of Blackthorn Pack territory, where Lyra Winters was about to discover that being sold to the crippled alpha was the best thing that had ever happened to her. Though she didn't know it yet. The apartment sat on the 3rd floor of a building that should have been condemned decades ago. A place where the stairs creaked with every step and the walls were stained with spreading patches of damp like infected wounds that never healed. Lyra pushed open the warped door and stepped inside, her hands still aching from scrubbing pack house floors for 14 hours straight. She had just finished her night shift cleaning the alpha's estate. Before that, 8 hours serving meals in the pack's communal dining hall. Before that, 6 hours hauling supplies at the border patrol station at dawn. Her body hurt so deeply she no longer remembered what it felt like to not be in pain. But the moment she saw her father sitting on the threadbare couch, a half-empty bottle of cheap whiskey in his trembling hand and that expression on his face, hope mixed with cowardice, she knew this night wouldn't end with ordinary exhaustion. Marcus Winters lifted his bloodshot eyes, and for the first time in years, he looked almost happy. He gestured for her to sit, his words slurring slightly as he announced he had good news. The best news in years. Everything was about to change. They were finally going to be free. Lyra didn't sit. She stood just inside the doorway with her arms crossed over her chest, her work uniform still damp with cleaning solution, and asked in a voice as cold as winter frost what he had done. Marcus laughed, the laugh of a drunk who had forgotten shame, and said he'd found a way to erase the $800,000 debt. No more enforcers pounding on the door. No more threats of exile. No more watching his daughter work herself to death for debts that weren't hers. Lyra looked at her father and felt ice crawl up her spine. Because in the pack hierarchy, nothing was free. Especially freedom. She asked again, her voice no longer cold but trembling with something close to dread, what he had done. Marcus set the bottle on the stained coffee table, looked at his daughter with an expression he probably thought was paternal but was really just cowardice wearing a mask, and said that Alpha Rhovan Blackthorn wanted to marry her. The room fell silent. Lyra heard her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Heard the neighbor's television through the thin walls. Heard traffic from the street below. But she couldn't hear anything that mattered anymore. Rhovan Blackthorn. The name echoed in her mind like a death sentence. The crippled Alpha. That's what everyone called him. The warrior who couldn't walk after the ambush 2 years ago. The Alpha who sat useless in a wheelchair while his beta ran everything. The man the pack pitied and enemies mocked. She looked at her father and asked in a voice that cracked despite her attempt at control whether he was selling her to a cripple. Whether after everything he'd taken from her, he was now taking her future too. Marcus wouldn't meet her eyes. He stared at the stained floor and muttered this was their only chance. If she refused, they'd both be exiled. Cast out as rogues. Left to die in the territories between packs. This wasn't a choice. This was survival. Lyra felt as though someone had wrapped iron chains around her throat. She thought of the past 5 years. 5 years of being called defective because her wolf never emerged. 5 years of working like a slave to pay debts her father gambled away. 5 years of watching her sister Thea bask in praise while she scrubbed floors. 5 years of enduring Cale Frost's rejection, the boy who'd promised to be her mate until the night she failed to shift. And now, after all that, her father sat there with whiskey on his breath and told her she had to marry a broken alpha to save his worthless hide. She wanted to scream. To grab him by his collar and demand why he'd brought her into this world if it was only to sell her like merchandise. But Lyra had learned long ago that screaming changed nothing. That tears didn't soften hearts that had none. That in this world, she could only rely on herself. She looked at her father with eyes like winter ice and asked when. Marcus replied that tomorrow a car would take her to the Blackthorn estate. If everything went smoothly, the wedding would happen within a week. Lyra nodded. Not because she accepted it, but because she understood that in that moment she didn't have the strength to fight. But deep inside her chest, where her wolf should have lived, a different kind of fire began to burn. The fire of hatred. Of waiting. Of a silent vow that one day, somehow, everyone who had made her suffer would answer for it. That night, Lyra didn't sleep. She lay on the thin mattress that let her feel every spring of the rusted bed frame pressing into her back, staring at water-stained ceiling tiles, letting memory drag her back 5 years to the night her life truly shattered. The awakening ceremony. Every wolf's 18th birthday, when their wolf finally emerged under the full moon. The entire pack gathered in the ancient stone circle to witness the transformation, to celebrate another young wolf joining their ranks. Lyra remembered standing in that circle, moonlight washing over her skin, feeling the expectation of hundreds of eyes. Her father watching with nervous hope. Her sister Thea, only 16 then, bouncing with excitement for Lyra's moment. And Cale Frost, 18 like her, holding her hand and whispering that soon they'd run together under the moon as mates. She remembered the elders chanting. The moon reaching its peak. The other young wolves beginning to shift, bones cracking and reforming, fur rippling across skin, joyous howls filling the night. And Lyra standing there, waiting, feeling, nothing. No heat in her blood. No pressure under her skin. No wolf rising to meet the moon. Just emptiness. The chanting stopped. The pack fell silent. Every eye fixed on her with growing horror and disgust. The elder approached, placed a weathered hand on her shoulder, and pronounced what everyone could see, the wolf had not come. She was wolfless. Defective. Broken. Kale dropped her hand like she'd burned him. Stepped away. Looked at her with something worse than hatred, with pity. And said loud enough for everyone to hear that he couldn't mate with an abomination. That the moon goddess herself had rejected her. 2 years later, he'd become engaged to Thea, whose golden wolf was the pride of their bloodline. Lyra closed her eyes against the memory and touched the strange birthmark on her shoulder blade. A silver wolf symbol that had been there since birth. Her grandmother, before she died, had whispered that it meant something. That Lyra's wolf wasn't gone, she was waiting. Waiting for what, her grandmother never said. Now, lying in the dark knowing tomorrow she'd be handed to a stranger, Lyra wondered if waiting was just another word for never. The black SUV arrived at dawn. Military-grade vehicle with tinted windows and the Blackthorn crest on the doors, a wolf's head surrounded by thorns. 2 guards in tactical gear stood beside it, their eyes cold and professional. Lyra stepped out of the apartment building carrying nothing but a small backpack with her few belongings. She didn't look back. Didn't say goodbye to the father still passed out on the couch. Left behind nothing but 5 years of silent suffering. The drive from the slums to the Alpha's mountain estate took 2 hours, but it felt like traveling between worlds. From crumbling buildings and mud-choked streets to pristine forest roads that climbed into territories most pack members never saw. Ancient pine trees towered on both sides, and Lyra could feel the power thrumming through the land. True Alpha territory, where the strongest bloodlines had ruled for centuries. When the SUV rounded the final curve and the Blackthorn estate came into view, Lyra had to force her face to remain neutral. It wasn't a house. It was a fortress carved into the mountain itself. Stone towers reaching toward grey clouds, massive walls embedded with wolf statues, Gothic architecture that spoke of age and unbreakable power. A place built to withstand sieges and centuries. The iron gates opened, and the vehicle climbed a stone-paved drive lined with armed guards. At the main entrance, 3 figures waited. The first was a man in his early 40s, tall and lean with silver threading through his dark hair. He wore an expensive black suit that fit like armor, and when Lyra stepped out of the SUV, he looked her up and down with the gaze of someone appraising livestock. Garrett Stone, one of the guards announced. Beater of Blackthorn Pack and Chief Administrator of Alpha Rhovan's affairs. Garrett didn't smile. Didn't offer greeting. Simply nodded once and said in a voice like ice, "You're smaller than I expected. The Alpha prefers women with more presence." Lyra met his gaze and said nothing. She'd learned long ago that silence was sometimes the best weapon. "Follow me." Garrett turned without waiting for response. The estate's interior matched its exterior, all stone and dark wood, tapestries depicting ancient wolf battles, weapons mounted on walls. It felt more like a museum of warfare than a home. Servants in uniform moved through hallways with heads bowed, and every one of them looked at Lyra with the same expression, pity mixed with curiosity about how long she'd last. Garrett led her through a maze of corridors, up a grand staircase, down another hall, finally stopping before massive oak doors carved with intricate wolf scenes. "The Alpha's study," Garrett said. "He's expecting you." He pushed open the doors but didn't enter. Try not to tire him. His condition makes extended conversations difficult. The way he said condition dripped with contempt that barely masked something else. Satisfaction, maybe. Or triumph. Lyra stepped into the study, and the doors closed behind her with a sound like a tomb ceiling. The study was massive, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the mountain territories that stretched for miles. Bookshelves lined 3 walls, filled with leather-bound volumes that looked centuries old. A fire crackled in a stone fireplace large enough to stand in. And in the center of the room, facing those windows with his back to the door, sat a man in a wheelchair. Rhovan Blackthorn didn't turn around. Didn't acknowledge her entrance. Just sat there in perfect stillness, silhouetted against the grey mountain light. Lyra stood just inside the doorway, unsure whether to speak or wait. The silence stretched, broken only by the fire's crackling and wind against the windows. She studied his back, broad shoulders even while seated, long dark hair past his collar, the powerful build of a warrior visible despite the chair. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, he spoke. His voice was deep, controlled, each word precisely chosen like a weapon being carefully aimed. "Why didn't you run?" Lyra blinked, surprised by the question. "Alpha. Your father gave you 3 days' notice before selling you. You could have run. Wolfless wolves survive as rogues sometimes. Why didn't you? She considered lying, then decided truth was simpler. Where would I go? Rogues get killed by territorial patrols or die alone in the wilderness. At least here I might survive. Survival. He seemed to taste the word. Good. That's all I need from you. He finally turned the wheelchair around, and Lyra got her first clear look at Rhovan Blackthorn's face. 32 years old, strong jawline covered by a thick beard, sharp cheekbones, and eyes that struck her like physical blows. Gold. Burning gold, like molten metal or trapped sunlight. Too bright. Too aware. Not the eyes of a broken man, but of a predator watching prey. Those eyes studied her with an intensity that made her want to step back, but she forced herself to stand still. You're younger than I expected, he said. And smaller. This will actually work better. Work for what, Alpha? For the contract. He gestured to a leather folder on the desk beside him. Our marriage will be exactly that, a contract. You play the devoted wife in public. You stay out of my business in private. In exchange, your father's debts are cleared, you receive private quarters in this estate, and a monthly allowance that's more than you've made in your entire life. Lyra moved closer, glancing at the papers. Legal documents with the Blackthorn seal. And other expectations. You mean the marriage bed? Something that might have been dark amusement flickered in his eyes. Look at me, Lyra Winters. I'm a cripple. My body doesn't work that way anymore. You're safe from any physical requirements. The way he said it felt like a test, but Lyra couldn't figure out what answer he wanted. So she simply asked, when is the wedding? 5 days. Pack law requires a public ceremony when an alpha takes a lunar. Every pack member must attend and witness the bond. And after, you smile when you're supposed to smile, stand where you're supposed to stand, and let the pack believe I've finally accepted my limitations by taking a wolfless wife. Someone who can't challenge me. Someone who makes me look even weaker than I already am. There it was. The real reason. Not mercy or attraction or even convenience. He wanted a Luna who made him look pathetic. A wolfless woman to complete his image of brokenness. Lyra should have felt insulted. Instead, she felt a strange kinship. They were both pretending to be less than they were. Though she suspected his pretense was far more deliberate than hers. I accept, she said. Rhovan nodded once. Good. Garrett will show you to your quarters. The wedding is in 5 days. Don't embarrass me. Dismissed, Lyra turned to leave, but his voice stopped her at the door. Lyra. She looked back. Those gold eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. The wedding night. When we're alone in the chambers. Don't scream when I stand up. The doors opened before she could respond, Garrett waiting in the hallway with that cold smile. But Lyra's mind was reeling. Don't scream when I stand up. When, not if. When. The crippled alpha could walk. The next 3 days passed in a strange blur. Lyra was given a suite of rooms larger than any space she'd ever lived in. Bedroom, sitting room, private bathroom with a tub that could fit 3 people. Servants brought her meals, new clothes, everything she could possibly need. But she felt constantly watched. On the second day, desperate for something to do besides sit in luxurious prison, Lyra explored the estate. Most doors were locked or guarded, but she found the library unattended. Thousands of books, scrolls, ancient texts in languages she couldn't read. She wandered the aisles, running fingers along spines, until a section caught her eye. Bloodlines and ancient lineages. Something compelled her to pull one particular volume, leather-bound, pages yellowed with age. She opened it carefully, scanning text about historical wolf families, until she found a chapter that made her blood run cold. The Winter Line. There were drawings. Wolves with silver-white fur and ice-blue eyes. Descriptions of powers, command over winter itself, immunity to cold, the ability to freeze enemies mid-strike. And a symbol. The exact symbol that marked her shoulder blade. Born of ice and moonlight, she read aloud. Winter wolves remain dormant until called forth by true alpha bond. The bloodline cannot be destroyed, only hidden. Waiting. Curious, aren't you? Lyra slammed the book shut and spun around. Garrett stood in the library entrance, that cold smile on his face. Curiosity killed many wolves, little Luna. I was just reading about extinct bloodlines. He moved closer, and despite having no wolf, Lyra felt prey instincts screaming at her to run. Let me give you some advice. Your role here is simple. Be decorative. Be quiet. Don't ask questions. Don't interfere with pack business. The alpha's condition makes him suggestible to proper counsel. As long as you remember your place, you'll be comfortable here. And if I don't remember my place? Garrett's smile widened, showing too many teeth. Then you'll learn why wolfless women don't last long in positions of power. He left, but his threat lingered in the air like poison. That night, Lyra couldn't sleep. Near midnight, she heard sounds from the wing where Rhovan's private chambers were located. Against all better judgment, she crept through the dark hallways following the noise. Through a window, she saw into what looked like a private training room. And there was Rhovan Blackthorn. Standing. Moving through combat forms with a warrior's lethal grace. Every muscle working perfectly. No weakness. No limitation. Just raw, controlled power. He was never crippled. It was all a lie. She gasped, and even through the thick glass, he heard it. His head snapped toward the window, those gold eyes locking onto hers through the darkness. Lyra ran. The next morning, Lyra was summoned to Rhovan's study. She entered expecting anger, punishment, maybe even death for discovering his secret. Instead, he sat in his wheelchair facing the windows as before, and didn't turn around when he spoke. You saw something last night. Not a question. A statement. Lyra's throat went dry. Lying seemed pointless. Yes, Alpha. Long silence. Wind howled against the windows. Finally, what did you see? She could tell the truth or she could play the game. Something told her he was testing which she'd choose. I saw nothing, Alpha. Another pause, longer this time. Then his shoulders moved in what might have been a laugh. Good. A wife who sees nothing will live longer. He gestured dismissal, and she turned to leave, but his voice stopped her at the door. Lyra. The wedding is tomorrow. After the ceremony, there will be a reception. Dangerous wolves will attend, enemies pretending to be guests. Stay close to me. Smile when I smile. And remember what I told you about the wedding night. Don't scream when you stand up. Exactly. This time he did turn the wheelchair to face her, and those gold eyes burned with something between warning and promise. Because that's when the real game begins. Dawn broke on her wedding day with grey clouds heavy with snow. Lyra woke to find her suite filled with servants preparing her. They dressed her in a gown of white silk covered in intricate wolf symbols embroidered in silver thread, the traditional lunar ceremony dress. The fabric clung to her small frame, making her look even more fragile than usual. A knock on the door, and her sister Thea entered, carrying a bouquet of white lilies. Thea had always been beautiful, golden hair, perfect features, the confidence of someone who'd never been told she wasn't enough. Her golden wolf had made her pack royalty. Now engaged to Kale Frost, she represented everything Lyra should have been but wasn't. Hello, sister, Thea said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I brought you a wedding gift. She held out the lilies, and Lyra took them cautiously. They were beautiful, pristine white with drops of morning dew still clinging to the petals. How thoughtful, Lyra said carefully. Kale and I wanted you to have something special for your big day. Thea's smile sharpened. Poor Lyra, marrying the crippled alpha. But I suppose wolfless deserves broken, doesn't it? You're perfect for each other, two defective wolves pretending to matter. Lyra met her sister's eyes and saw the poison there. Not just cruelty, but satisfaction. Thea had spent 5 years basking in being the golden daughter while Lyra scrubbed floors. This wedding to a broken alpha was just confirmation of the natural order. Funny, Lyra said quietly. I always thought you were the scared one. Thea's smile faltered for just a moment. What? You heard me. Before Thea could respond, Garrett appeared in the doorway. It's time, Miss Winters. The ceremony begins. The ancient amphitheater was carved into the mountain itself, stone seats rising in circles around a central platform open to the sky. Hundreds of wolves packed the space, the entire Blackthorn pack, plus visiting alphas and their delegations from neighboring territories. The air hummed with barely contained power from so many dominant wolves in one place. Lyra was escorted down the stone steps, and every eye turned to watch. She heard the whispers, saw the smirks and pitying looks. The wolfless bride. How appropriate for the crippled alpha. At the center platform, Rhovan waited in his wheelchair. He wore formal black, the Blackthorn crest on his chest, his long dark hair pulled back. He looked every inch the alpha, except for that chair. That symbol of weakness that made enemies smile and allies look away in embarrassment. But Lyra noticed what others didn't. The way his hands gripped the armrests with controlled strength. The way those gold eyes tracked every movement in the crowd with predatory awareness. The way he held himself despite the chair, like a king on a throne, not an invalid needing support. She reached the platform and stood beside him, clutching her lily bouquet with hands that wanted to tremble but didn't. The pack's elder began the ceremony, speaking in the old tongue. Ancient words that bound alphas to lunas under the moon's witness. Words that had been spoken for thousands of years. In the front row, Kael Frost sat with Thea's hand possessively on his arm. He wouldn't meet Lyra's eyes, as if looking at her might contaminate him. Also in the front, 3 council members who kept glancing at Garrett with barely concealed anticipation. And in the visiting alpha section, a tall man with cruel eyes and a smile like a blade, Damien Cross, alpha of Crescent Moon Pack. The elders' chanting reached a crescendo, and Rhovan spoke the vow in a voice that carried to every corner of the amphitheater. I, Rhovan Blackthorn, alpha of the Northern Territories, claim this female as Luna under Moon's witness. Her blood is my blood. Her enemies are my enemies. Her life is bound to mine until death breaks the bond. The words settled over Lyra like a physical weight. Magic, old and powerful, recognizing the vow. Now it was her turn. She spoke clearly despite her fear. I, Lyra Winters, accept this bond. I stand as Luna to Rhovan Blackthorn. My loyalty is his. My life is his. Until death breaks what the moon has witnessed. The elder placed their hands together, and the bond snapped into place. Not the mate bond of true pays, but the formal Alpha Luna bond of pack law. Lyra felt it like electricity racing through her veins, foreign and overwhelming. The bond is sealed, the elder pronounced. The Alpha has his Luna. The pack rose, howling their acknowledgement. The sound was deafening, primal, the song of wolves accepting their Luna. Even the visiting Alphas joined, though some howls carried mockery. Damien Cross approached during the reception in the Great Hall, all false warmth and sharp edges. Blackthorn. Touching ceremony. Almost made me forget your pack is bleeding territory to mine. Rhovan's response was calm, unbothered. Almost. But not quite. Something flickered in Damien's eyes, frustration that his barb hadn't landed. He moved on, but Lyra felt the weight of his attention like a target painted on her back. The feast stretched for hours. Lyra sat at the high table beside Rhovan, playing her part, smiling when appropriate, accepting congratulations from wolves who couldn't hide their pity. Finally, as night fell and the moon rose full and heavy over the mountains, the traditional moment arrived. The escort of the Luna to the Alpha's chambers. Lyra walked through corridors lined with pack members, their faces showing everything from sympathy to cruel amusement. Thea's whisper followed her. Enjoy your wedding night with the cripple, sister. The massive doors to Rhovan's private chambers closed behind her with a sound like a tomb ceiling. She stood alone in the candlelit room, still in her wedding gown, still clutching the wilting lilies, and waited. And then Rhovan approached. Rhovan wheeled himself to the center of the chamber, and Lyra stood frozen by the window, forcing herself not to tremble. The candles cast dancing shadows across stone walls, and the massive bed dominated one corner like a threat neither of them acknowledged. The silence stretched until it became almost unbearable. Then Rhovan spoke, his voice quiet but carrying absolute authority. They told you I was broken. Lyra nodded, not trusting her voice. They told you I was weak. Another nod. Good. And Rhovan Blackthorn stood. Not slowly, not with effort or hesitation. He rose from that wheelchair like a mountain remembering its height, like a predator uncoiling from rest. The sheer presence that flooded the room drove Lyra back 3 steps until her back hit the stone wall. This wasn't a broken man. This was an apex predator who'd been lying perfectly still, and she just realized she was locked in with him. He was massive, 6'5" at least, with the build of a warrior who'd spent years perfecting violence. Broad shoulders, powerful arms, every movement controlled and lethal. His gold eyes burned with an intensity that made the candlelight seem dim. "My legs work perfectly," Rhovan said, rolling his shoulders as 2 years of false stillness melted away. "My wolf is stronger than he's ever been. And for 742 days, I've watched every wolf who thought they could take my pack, my territory, my life." Lyra's heart hammered against her ribs. "Why are you telling me this?" He crossed the room in 3 strides, and suddenly he was right in front of her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him, could see the scars on his hands from battles she'd never witnessed. "Because you're not my prisoner, Lyra. You're my weapon." "I don't understand." The ambush 2 years ago was real. Crescent Moon warriors attacked during a territorial negotiation. They had inside information, exactly where I'd be, exactly when, exactly how many guards I'd have. His voice was cold, precise, like he was reciting facts about someone else's attempted murder. "I killed 6 of them before one got lucky with an explosive. Woke up 3 days later in medical, and the healers told me I'd never walk again." "But you can walk." "I could walk the day I woke up. Took me maybe 2 hours to realize the accident wasn't an accident. Someone in my inner circle had sold me out. So I made a choice." He stepped back, gesturing to the wheelchair. "I let them think they'd succeeded. Let them think I was crippled. Dependent. Broken." Lyra's mind raced. "You've been pretending for 2 years. 742 days of sitting in that chair. Watching my beater run my pack. Listening to council members discuss my condition with barely hidden satisfaction. Enduring visiting alphas who came to measure my territory for themselves." His smile was sharp enough to cut. "And documenting every single betrayal." He moved to his desk and produced a black leather journal, its pages filled with precise handwriting. Every whispered conversation. Every secret meeting. Every deal made with enemy packs. All of it recorded. Garrett Stone, my trusted beater, orchestrating the whole conspiracy. 3 council members taking bribes from Crescent Moon. Plans to divide my territory once I was eliminated. He set the journal down with deliberate care. "But dead alphas can't take revenge. Crippled alphas can watch and wait." "For what?" "For the perfect moment to invoke Judgment Moon." Lyra shook her head. "I don't know what that means." Rhovan's expression shifted to something almost like respect. "Of course you don't. Most wolves think the old laws are just ceremony. They are not. Judgment Moon is an ancient rite. An alpha can call all pack members to answer for treason, but only after certain conditions are met. One of those conditions is taking a Luna." Understanding crashed over Lyra like ice water. "That's why you needed to marry." "Exactly. Pack law requires the alpha to be bonded to a Luna before invoking Judgment Moon. The ceremony has to be witnessed by the entire pack. The Luna must be present during the accusations." He watched her process this. "Tomorrow night is the full moon. Tomorrow night, every wolf who betrayed me will stand in that amphitheater and hear their crimes read aloud. And then they'll die." The casual way he said it sent chills down Lyra's spine. This wasn't rage or revenge fantasy. This was cold, calculated justice delivered by someone who'd spent 2 years planning every detail. "Why me?" she asked. "Why not marry someone with a wolf? Someone strong?" "Because you were perfect." He retrieved a different book from his desk, the same ancient text she'd found in the library. 3 months ago, I started researching bloodlines. Looking for something specific. And I found it. The winter line. He opened the book to the pages she'd read, the drawings of silver wolves and descriptions of impossible powers. "Extinct," Lyra said. "They were all killed." "Hidden," Rhovan corrected. "Not extinct. Scattered and suppressed, but the bloodline survived. And you, Lyra Winters, are a direct descendant." He gestured to her shoulder. "That mark you've carried since birth? That's not a birthmark. That's the winter seal. Your wolf isn't gone. She's dormant." "That's impossible." I stood in the awakening circle. Nothing happened. "Because you hadn't met your alpha yet." He said it with absolute certainty. Winter wolves are different. Their wolves don't emerge during normal awakening. They remain dormant until called forth by a true alpha bond. The old texts are clear. Winter wolves know their mate, and only that connection can wake them. Lyra's hand moved unconsciously to her shoulder, touching the mark through her wedding gown. You think you're my mate? I know I'm your alpha. Whether we're fated mates or not doesn't matter. What matters is that your bloodline responds to alpha power. He moved closer again, and this time Lyra didn't back away. Garrett wanted you isolated and suppressed because he knew what you might become. Your sister Thea has been poisoning you with low-grade wolfsbane for 3 years to keep your wolf dormant. What? The word came out as a gasp. The bouquet she gave you today. I could smell it from across the amphitheater. Wolfsbane hidden in the water. One more dose to keep you compliant. His eyes burned. But you're not drinking any more poison, Lyra. Starting tomorrow, your wolf wakes up. And when she does, every traitor who tried to keep you powerless will understand why winter wolves were feared enough to hunt to extinction. Lyra's mind spun. Thea poisoning her. Garrett knowing about her bloodline. Her wolf not gone but waiting. All of it converging into one impossible truth. What do you need me to do? The question came out steadier than she felt. Rhovan's slight smile held dark satisfaction. Tomorrow night at the Judgment Moon, stand beside me. Look like a Luna. And when your wolf finally wakes, don't hold her back. How do you know she'll wake? He stepped close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. The presence rolling off him was overwhelming, pure alpha dominance that should have terrified her but instead called to something deep in her chest. Because I'm your alpha, Lyra. And winter wolves know their mate when he calls them home. She felt it then. Heat flooding her veins, a stirring she'd never experienced in 23 years. Something responding to his nearness, his power, his absolute certainty. Now the real game begins, Rhovan said softly. Get some sleep. Tomorrow, we burn down everyone who underestimated us. Lyra didn't sleep. How could she, knowing everything she'd just learned? She lay in the massive bed in Rhovan's chambers. He'd taken the adjoining room, giving her privacy, and felt her entire understanding of herself shifting like tectonic plates. Her wolf wasn't gone. Just waiting. For him. Near dawn, she finally dozed off, only to wake a few hours later to find Rhovan already up, dressed in training clothes, looking completely recovered from 2 years of pretending to be paralyzed. Today, you'll spend time in the gardens, he said without preamble. The estate grounds, visible from multiple angles. Make yourself look vulnerable. You're using me as bait. I'm giving them the opportunity to make a mistake. He checked a knife strapped to his forearm. Garrett isn't stupid. By now he's noticed something different about you. The way you carry yourself after the bonding. If he's smart, and he is, he'll realize the Judgment Moon is imminent. His only move is to eliminate you before tomorrow night. And you want him to try. I want him to commit fully. To show his hand completely. To bring everyone involved so I can end this in one strike. Rhovan's gold eyes fixed on her. Can you do this? Lyra thought of 5 years of humiliation. Of her sister's poison. Of Kale's rejection. Of being called worthless and broken and defective. Yes, she said. I can do this. When they come, run toward the forest. Lead them away from the estate. I'll be waiting. How will you know when? I'll know. He said it with absolute confidence. Remember what I told you. When your wolf comes, don't fight her. Mid-morning, Lyra walked through the estate's formal gardens, wearing a simple dress and appearing lost in thought. The gardens were beautiful, winter roses somehow still blooming, stone pathways winding between frozen fountains, high hedges providing privacy while still allowing sight lines from the upper floors. She picked roses slowly, making herself an easy target, and tried not to think about what was coming. An hour passed. Then 2. Her fingers were numb from cold when she finally heard footsteps behind her. She turned to find Kale Frost emerging from between 2 hedges, and her stomach dropped. 4 warriors flanked him, all wearing expressions of predatory satisfaction. Hello, wolfless, Kale said, and his smile was cruel enough to cut. Did you really think the cripple could protect you? Lyra backed away, just as Rhovan had instructed. The Alpha will. The Alpha is a broken invalid who can't even stand. Kale moved closer, and the warriors fanned out to cut off escape routes. But don't worry. We'll make this quick. An unfortunate accident. Tragic that the new Luna died so soon after the wedding. Lyra ran. Not from fear, though fear certainly pumped through her veins, but tactically, deliberately, leading them exactly where Rhovan wanted them. She heard their laughter as they chased her. Heard Kale calling out mockery about how she couldn't even shift to escape. Heard their footsteps gaining as she sprinted through the gardens toward the forest edge. The tree line loomed, and Lyra plunged into shadows between ancient pines. Branches whipped at her face. Roots tried to trip her. Behind her, the warriors crashed through undergrowth, enjoying the hunt. She ran until her lungs burned, until she reached a small ravine, until rough hands grabbed her from behind and slammed her against a tree trunk. Kale's face filled her vision, knife appearing in his hand. Should have stayed wolfless and irrelevant. Now you're just a loose end. He pressed the blade to her throat, and Lyra felt cold steel against her skin. The cripple can't save you now, Kale whispered. No, came a voice from above, deep and promising death. But the Alpha can. Rhovan dropped from the tree branches like a nightmare given form. What happened next was brutality refined to art. He moved like violence incarnate, like every combat form perfected over decades of warfare. The first warrior went down with a crushed windpipe before he could react. The second took a knife to the spine. The third tried to shift, bones beginning to crack and reform, and Rhovan put him down mid-transformation with an efficiency that spoke of endless practice. Kale released Lyra and lunged, his own wolf beginning to emerge. Golden fur rippled across skin, bones breaking and reshaping, jaws extending. Rhovan caught him mid-shift with one hand around his throat and slammed him into the ground so hard the earth cratered. Then he systematically broke both of Kale's legs while the half-shifted wolf screamed. You rejected her, Rhovan said conversationally, his voice calm despite the violence. Called her defective. Made her believe she was worthless. He broke another bone, and Kale's screams echoed through the forest. That was your first mistake. The fourth warrior tried to run. Rhovan threw his knife with casual precision, and the warrior dropped. And in the center of all that violence, something ignited in Lyra. Heat flooded her veins like liquid fire. Her vision sharpened until she could see individual leaves on trees hundreds of yards away. Her hearing expanded until she could hear heartbeats, breathing, the whisper of wind through fur. 23 years of suppression, of poison, of being told she was broken, all of it condensed into a single point of white-hot rage. And her wolf exploded to the surface. The transformation was agony and ecstasy combined. Bones breaking and reforming, muscles tearing and rebuilding, skin splitting as fur erupted. But unlike normal shifts that took minutes, hers happened in seconds. As if her wolf had been coiled tight for 23 years and finally snapped free. When it finished, Lyra stood on 4 legs for the first time in her life. She was massive, larger than any female wolf she'd ever seen. Silver-white fur that seemed to glow in the forest shadows. Eyes like ice in winter moonlight. And power, so much power radiating from her that the remaining warrior who tried to crawl away froze in terror. Her wolf's instincts took over. She leaped, and the warrior didn't have time to scream. When the forest fell silent except for their breathing, Rhovan stood among the bodies and looked at her with something between satisfaction and awe. Hello, Luna, he said softly. Lyra's wolf recognized him. Not just as Alpha, but as hers. As home. As the one who'd called her from darkness into light. She shifted back. This time the transformation flowed like water, natural as breathing, and found herself naked, shaking, changed forever. Rhovan removed his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. Now they'll come for us with everything they have. Good. Let them. In the distance, alarm bells rang from the estate. Garrett would know by now. The conspiracy was exposed. The trap was sprung. Tomorrow night, at the Judgment Moon, accounts would be settled in blood. The full moon rose blood-red over the mountains, casting everything in crimson light. Every member of Blackthorn pack filed into the ancient amphitheater, confusion and fear thick in the air. Attendance wasn't optional. When an alpha invoked Judgment Moon, pack law demanded every wolf bear witness. Lyra stood in the preparation chamber beneath the amphitheater, wearing formal lunar ceremonial robes of silver and white. Her wolf prowled just beneath her skin, no longer dormant but awake and hungry. She could feel the bond humming between her and Rhovan, could sense his cold fury like ice in her veins. "Ready?" Rhovan asked, appearing in the doorway. He wore full alpha regalia, black leather and the Blackthorn crest, weapons visible at his belt. No wheelchair. No pretense of weakness. Just raw, undeniable power. "Ready," Lyra confirmed. They walked through the torchlit tunnel toward the amphitheater center, and with each step, Lyra felt her wolf rising. Not frightened anymore. Not hidden. But ready to remind everyone why winter wolves had been hunted, because they were terrifying when they finally woke up. The crowd's murmur died the instant they emerged into the amphitheater. Rhovan Blackthorn was walking. The silence was absolute. Thousands of wolves staring in shock as their supposedly crippled alpha crossed the central platform on two strong legs, moving with the lethal grace of an apex predator who'd been hiding in plain sight. Garrett Stone sat in the position of honor, and the color drained from his face. Beside him, the three council members looked like they'd seen death itself. In the visiting section, Alpha Damien Cross leaned forward, his casual arrogance replaced by sudden wariness. Rhovan reached the Alpha's stone, an ancient pillar carved with pack history, and his voice carried to every corner of the amphitheater without strain. "For 2 years, I have been called broken. Weak. Finished. A cripple who let his beater run his pack while he withered in a wheelchair." He let that sink in, watched realization spread like poison through the crowd. "And I let you believe it. Because a wolf learns more about his pack when they think he can't hunt." Garrett tried to stand, tried to speak. Loyal warriors blocked his path, weapons drawn. "By the ancient laws, invoked under full moon with my lunar present, I call Judgment Moon." Rhovan produced the black leather journal, and several wolves gasped in recognition. Every act of treason. Every whispered conspiracy. Every betrayal. All documented. He began to read. Garrett Stone, Beater of Blackthorn Pack. 412 instances of meeting with enemy alphas without alpha permission. 267 instances of accepting bribes to reveal pack secrets. And 1 instance of orchestrating the ambush meant to assassinate your alpha. Rhovan's voice was cold as winter death. "On the date of the attempted murder, you provided Crescent Moon warriors with my location, my guard rotation, and the exact timing of the territorial meeting. You ensured I would be vulnerable. You intended for me to die." "That's a lie." Garrett snarled. "You have no proof." "I have your cousin." Rhovan gestured, and Cale Frost was dragged onto the platform, broken and defeated. He confessed everything, including who paid Lyra's father to sell her specifically to me. Lyra's breath caught. She'd wondered why her father's enormous debt had suddenly become her problem, why the timing had been so convenient. "You paid Marcus Winters to force his daughter into marriage with me," Rhovan continued. "Because you discovered what she was. A Winter bloodline descendant. And you feared what would happen if her wolf awakened with an alpha strong enough to call her." Garrett's face twisted with rage and fear. "She's nothing. Wolfless trash." "Show them," Rhovan said quietly, looking at Lyra. Lyra stepped forward and shifted. The transformation rippled through her like lightning. One moment a small woman in ceremonial robes, the next a massive silver-white wolf that towered over the platform. Her eyes blazed ice blue, and frost spread across the stone where her paws touched. The amphitheater erupted. Wolves backing away in fear, others dropping to submissive postures, visiting alphas staring in shock at a bloodline they'd thought extinct. Lyra shifted back, and her voice carried with new authority. "My sister Thea has been poisoning me with wolfsbane for 3 years. Keeping my wolf suppressed. Keeping me weak and isolated." She turned to where Thea sat with horror on her face. "The wedding bouquet. The drinks you brought me. The food you always insisted I eat. All of it laced with poison." I didn't," Thea stammered. "Cale already confessed," Rhovan cut her off. "You were paid by Garrett to keep Lyra suppressed. You knew exactly what you were doing." He returned to the black ledger, reading name after name. Council members who'd sold territory rights. Warriors who'd passed information to enemy packs. Even some visiting wolves who'd been offered pieces of Blackthorn land in exchange for supporting the conspiracy. With each name, loyal warriors moved to apprehend the accused. With each revelation, the web of betrayal grew clearer. Finally, Rhovan turned to where Damien Cross sat in the visiting section. Alpha Cross. You paid for the ambush. You provided the explosives. You promised Garrett he could rule Blackthorn as your puppet once I was eliminated. Damien smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Prove it. I don't need to prove it to you. Only to my pack. Rhovan held up a recording device. 2 years of conversations, Damien. Including the one where you laughed about how easy it would be to kill a crippled alpha. He played it. Damien's voice clear as day, discussing payment schedules and territory division, mocking Rhovan's supposed weakness. The visiting alphas shifted uncomfortably. Assassinating another alpha was the gravest violation of territorial law. Damien had just lost any political protection. The old laws are clear, Rhovan announced. Treason against an alpha, proven under Judgment Moon with Luna present, carries 1 sentence. Death. Garrett lunged then, his wolf exploding forth in a desperate bid for escape. But Rhovan was faster. He shifted mid-leap, a massive black wolf with gold eyes that blazed like fire, and caught Garrett's throat in his jaws. The execution was swift. Brutal. Necessary. One by one, the proven traitors were brought forward. One by one, they answered to pack justice. The old laws showed no mercy, and Rhovan granted none. Kale, already broken, was exiled, legs shattered so he'd never run as a wolf again, marked as a traitor for any pack that found him. Thea, screaming and pleading, was stripped of her pack status and exiled. You were nothing, she shrieked at Lyra. You deserved nothing. Lyra's wolf surged forward, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of winter itself. I am winter returned. And you will die slowly knowing you created your own destruction. The council members were executed. The corrupted warriors fell. And when Damien Cross tried to fight his way out, Rhovan and Lyra hunted him together, Alpha and Luna, Black Wolf and Silver, moving in perfect synchronization until the crescent moon Alpha lay dead at their feet. When the moon reached its peak and the blood had been spilled, Rhovan stood at the Alpha's stone in human form, Lyra at his side, and spoke the words that sealed a new era. I am Rhovan Blackthorn. I have never been broken. And this is my Luna, Lyra of the Winter Line, returned from the darkness you tried to bury her in. His voice carried to every corner, to every wolf. Test us again, and you won't live long enough to regret it. The pack bowed. Not from fear alone, but from recognition. Their alpha had returned, and he'd brought a queen forged in fire and ice. 6 months later, winter had fully claimed the northern territories. Snow blanketed the mountains in pristine white, and the Blackthorn estate stood like a fortress against the cold, but inside, everything had changed. Lyra woke in the Alpha's chambers with Rhovan's arm around her waist, his warmth against her back. The bond between them had deepened from formal Alpha-Luna connection to something neither had expected, a mate bond, real and absolute. Her winter wolf had known before either of them admitted it. She felt him wake, felt his awareness sharpening even before he moved. Morning, Luna, he murmured against her neck. Morning, Alpha. She turned in his arms, and his gold eyes met her ice-blue ones. 6 months ago she'd been a wolfless nobody. Now she was Luna in truth, and the pack flourished under their combined rule. The traitors had been purged. Territory reclaimed. Neighboring packs learned quickly that the crippled Alpha had been the most dangerous predator in 5 territories, and his winter wolf Luna was equally lethal. After breakfast, Lyra made her way to the training grounds where young wolves practiced combat forms. She'd started teaching 3 months ago, sharing her own journey from defective to deadly, showing them that weakness could be camouflage. A young female wolf named Iris approached nervously. 16, small for her age, constantly told she wasn't strong enough. Luna? Can I ask you something? Of course. What if I really am weak? What if everyone's right about me? Lyra knelt to meet the girl's eyes. Let me tell you something. For 23 years, everyone told me I was broken. Defective. Worthless. They made me believe my wolf was gone. But she wasn't gone, she was waiting for the right moment. She stood, and her presence radiated winter wolf power. Weakness is not defeat, Iris. It's camouflage. Let them underestimate you. Then strike when they least expect it. The girl's eyes widened with new understanding. Lyra spent the morning training, then met Rhovan in his study for their daily strategy session. They'd been systematically dismantling what remained of the conspiracy, reclaiming stolen territories, and rebuilding pack strength. But today, Rhovan had something different on his face. Not quite a smile, but close. A private investigator I hired 6 months ago finally reported back. He slid a folder across the desk. Lyra opened it with trembling hands, and her breath stopped. Photographs. Documentation. A trail leading to a trafficking ring operating across 3 territories. And at the center of it is this. She couldn't finish the question. Your cousin was taken the same way your family history suggested others might have been. Different branch, different timing, but the same criminal network. Rhovan's voice gentled. It's a lead, Lyra. A real one. She told him about her family's whispered stories, about others who'd disappeared into darkness. It wasn't just her, it was a pattern. We can find them, she whispered. We will find them. And we'll burn that trafficking ring to the ground. He stood and came around the desk. Consider it a wedding gift. The real one. Lyra threw her arms around him, and for the first time in years, she felt something close to hope for the family she'd lost. That afternoon, she made a journey she'd been putting off for months. To the exiled territories at the edge of Packlands, where rogues and banished wolves scraped out survival. Marcus Winters lived in a shack that made their old apartment look palatial. When Lyra appeared at his door, he fell to his knees, sobbing. Lyra, please. I'm sorry. I had no choice. Please forgive me. She looked down at the man who'd sold her, who'd made her childhood a nightmare of debt and desperation, and felt nothing. No anger. No hatred. Just cold assessment. You always had a choice, she said quietly. You chose yourself. Every single time. That's why you're here, dying alone in exile, while I'm Luna of the most powerful pack in the north. I'm your father. You stopped being my father the day you made me a commodity. She pulled out an envelope and dropped it at his feet. Money for food. Not forgiveness. Just proof that I'm better than you ever were. She walked away without looking back, and with each step, felt another chain of her past breaking. That evening, War Council convened in the Great Hall. Rhovan, Lyra, the new beater, a loyal warrior named Marcus who'd helped expose the conspiracy, and reformed council members. Maps covered the massive table, showing territories and pack boundaries. Crescent Moon is in chaos after Damien's death, the new beater reported. 3 potential successors fighting for control. Their pack is fractured. Good, Rhovan said. That's when we move. They orchestrated my attempted assassination. They sold weapons to traitors. They tried to divide our territory. His gold eyes gleamed. Time they learned that debts get paid with interest. Lyra leaned over the maps, her tactical mind seeing patterns others missed. If we approach from the northern ridge and cut off their supply routes here and here, we can force them to negotiate from weakness. The council members looked impressed. She'd proven herself not just as Luna by title, but by earned respect. Her strategic insights had won 2 territorial disputes in the past 3 months without bloodshed. We move in 2 weeks, Rhovan decided. Full force. No mercy for those who attacked us. Late that night, Lyra found Rhovan on the estate balcony, overlooking their territories that stretched to the horizon. Snow fell gently, and the full moon cast everything in silver light. She joined him, and he wrapped his arms around her from behind. Do you regret it? He asked quietly. The violence, the blood, the crown you never asked for. Lyra thought about everything, the Judgment Moon executions, the political battles, the weight of lunar responsibility. Then she thought about her wolf finally free, about a mate who saw her strength instead of her defects, about young wolves like Iris looking at her with hope instead of pity. I regret nothing, she said firmly. Every scar, every moment of pain, made me who I am. She turned in his arms. Besides, I got you. His expression softened in a way only she ever saw. You always had me. From the moment I found your file and realized what you were capable of becoming. They stood there in comfortable silence, until a messenger burst onto the balcony with urgent news. Alpha. Luna. Message from the eastern border. Alpha Damien's successor has issued a formal challenge. Alpha combat. Winner takes all territories. Rhovan looked at Lyra, and she saw the predator awakening in his eyes. What do you think, Luna? Lyra smiled, and her wolf surged forward, frost spreading across the balcony stones. I think we have a war to win. Below them, their pack prepared. Warriors training, strategies forming, the machinery of war beginning to turn. They were no longer the broken and the wolfless. They were the alpha who'd turned weakness into a weapon and the Luna who'd risen from nothing to become legend. In the northern territories, the stories were already spreading. Of the crippled alpha who was never crippled at all. Of the wolfless girl who became winter incarnate. Of justice delivered under a blood moon to traitors who thought they'd won. And the most important lesson, whispered in pack houses and around fires, never underestimate the ones who stay silent. Because they are not weak. They are hunting. This story is for everyone who's ever been underestimated. Everyone who's been told they are not enough. Everyone who's sat in silence while the world dismissed them. If Lyra and Rhovan's journey resonated with you, if you've ever felt broken and then discovered you were just waiting for your moment, I need you to do something right now. Hit that subscribe button. Because there are more stories coming. Stories of people who turned their pain into power. Who let the world think they were defeated right up until the moment they struck back. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's struggling. Someone who's been called worthless or weak or broken. Send it to them and say, your time is coming. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what moment in this story hit you hardest. Was it when Rhovan finally stood? When Lyra's wolf awakened? When the traitors faced justice? I read every single comment, and your stories matter. The ones who wait in silence always strike the hardest. The ones who let you think they are beaten are often the most dangerous. Remember, weakness is not defeat. It's camouflage. Now go out there and show the world what you're really made of. Subscribe, share, and never let anyone make you feel small again.